Thank you, everyone, for joining us here at Wisdom Tree for the next episode of the Next Big Thing podcast. We've had a lot of interesting guests lately, all sorts of different topics. Today, we are exceptionally excited. By the way, I'm Chris Gannatti, Global Head of Research here, joined by Elvira Kuramshina, who is our Associate Director of Quantitative Research. Elvira and I, the reason we're here is we speak a lot about quantum computing. That is an area of our thematic focus. And we are extremely excited to be joined by BTQ. This is a company within the quantum computing space, the quantum encryption space. And what we're particularly pumped up about is if you think about 2025, the year, it was such an exciting topic at various points in the year. Obviously, certain securities in the public markets were going up, they were going down, the volatility was high. But the constant throughout the year was the interest, the number of headlines, the way in which different developments in quantum computing were treated. And for me, I noticed a big difference from roughly a year ago when Google came out, they announced their Willow chip, and everything that happened after that was done indicated almost like a new consciousness, the dawning of a new awareness of this technology, which is still in development. And it'll be interesting to get BTQ's take on where they see it in terms of being in development. But the reason I say it's still in development is there's not the universal gate-based, fault-tolerant quantum computer up and running and actually doing stuff, at least as we have this discussion. Various firms predict that moment can occur, maybe 2028, maybe 2029. We'll ultimately see. But helping to distill in a digestible way what's really going on, to me, is one of the key gaps. And hopefully, after joining us for roughly 1 hour today, you'll feel like you've learned a bit more. So the first thing I want to do for the two people, the two guests from BTQ, is I'm going to have each one introduce themselves a bit. I want to start with Sean Hackett. Sean, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you've come to BTQ?
Yeah, absolutely. First, Chris, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to be here. Um, the story behind getting involved with BTQ is very interesting. I was a student at Stanford. I was studying physics. I had a couple of best friends there, one who was a chip designer and one who was a great cybersecurity person. At some point along the line, we had a really crazy idea to found a chip company out of Stanford. I think if you know anything about founding chip companies and semiconductors and that sort of thing, having that idea in your brain as a 20-year-old is super crazy. Very few people would ever even try it or dare to do it if they knew how hard it could be. But the veil of ignorance was over my eyes, and we took the plunge. And together, we set out to create a new kind of cryptographic chip technology. So we worked on that over a 4-year time span. The goal was to make the most performant post-quantum secure chip technology that we could possibly make. We were borrowing techniques from all over the chip industry, borrowing from AI, from safety critical systems, all sorts of things. And what we came out with was a brand new way to make security chips. By the time we hit 2024, we had met BTQ, who was working on a variety of different quantum related products. And notably, they wanted to get involved in hardware security, which is something that me and my team specialized in. So we met, sparks flew. We knew that we needed to get working together, and that resulted in an acquisition of my company, Radical Semiconductor. So I'm super excited at BTQ to actually be joined by my co-founder, Zach Belatesh, who's the head of hardware security, and our head of cryptography, Ann Reinders.
Thank you, Sean. And we're also joined from BTQ by Chris Tam. Chris, I would love to get your story, your origins here in quantum encryption and BTQ.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, guys. It's a good opportunity. And yeah, my journey for BTQ started I mean, it was really when I was back in university. I was studying computer science at Western University, and was doing some machine learning research. And it came at a time when I was essentially faced with sort of two career paths I could pursue. One was AI and machine learning, which has obviously turned out to be a fantastic industry. But the other one, which I saw as a more existential, a really more interesting problem, was the threat of quantum computers and the challenges it poses to encryption. And so I made a decision after working at a machine learning company to jump ship and come over to BTQ to help secure the world's digital infrastructure from quantum computers. We've been at this, as a company, BTQ, we've been at this problem for well over a decade. Our IP spans back, almost 15 years. And as a company, we've matured quite nicely to encompass all levels of the product stack. So, with the acquisition of Sean's team, we cover hardware. Our team had been building hardware to that prior to the acquisition as well. So we have lots of experience with regards to building hardware. We've been building software for post quantum cryptography. And now, most recently, our company has announced our option to acquire a French quantum computing company in QPerfect. And so we're at this really interesting stage now where, relatively young still. I mean, 5 years and counting, but we've been able to sort of straddle what we believe are sort of both sides of the most important problem of our time, being quantum computing. We have both. We call it defensive solutions via post-quantum cryptography to secure businesses. And then we also have offensive solutions to actually utilize these quantum computers to do useful and productive things.
Now, Sean, I wanted to ground our discussion because when you said founding a chip company, obviously in today's world, again, the year 2025, you sit there and you basically think chip company, NVIDIA. And, what people may not realize is there are a lot more chip companies than just NVIDIA and AMD and, the big names that you hear of where you almost think like, how the heck could somebody even conceive of founding such a company that in the next 30 years could be valued in trillions of dollars? When you say hardware chip. I'm sitting looking at this. Some listeners might be looking at this on a laptop. They might be listening to it on what we think of now as a smartphone. When you say sort of this security chip, would that chip, at least in theory, be deployed into these devices that we might be using to partake and listen to our discussion today?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of the sort of talk around semiconductor companies, obviously, the AI boom has put a massive interest on high performance compute hardware for the acceleration of AI. So, obviously, NVIDIA is a top company there, but there have also been hundreds of startups that have been founded specifically to make AI compute more efficient. Um, but there have been many such massive booms in semiconductors. Before AI, there was the mobility boom. So all of our handheld devices needed to get low power chips. That was a massive revolution in the industry. And before that, having all the devices connect to the internet was a massive revolution that created a whole different sort of class of chips. Our class of chips that we care about is something called a secure element. It's like a really tiny chip that you would find in practically any internet connected device. People have been making these for decades and decades at this point. And they're the reason why we can all access the internet from our mobile phones, from our computers, from an IoT device, even nowadays, off of a really, really small power draw. You have to have security to use the internet and make that safe for you. So these chips are found all over the world. There are over 25 billion secure element chips out there in the world today. And as the number of semiconductor products are made, that number is only exponentially increasing. So this sort of a chip is the kind of thing that you would find in practically any internet connected device. So our company, while we do we do make standalone secure element chips, and we're well on the way towards launching our own. You also have cryptographic acceleration IP that can be used in a number of systems. So think about like the part of a GPU that might have to run the security mechanisms for the whole chip. That's a place where our IP could be used. In short, cryptographic technology is in every chip. And so that's sort of our market. It's a very, very huge market. It's very rare for a chip company to get to say that. But that's the truth when it comes to security.
I actually have a question, I guess both for Chris and Sean. So working in post-quantum cryptography essentially means that you are tied to any progress and breakthrough that are happening in quantum computing. Was there a moment in your career when you realized that this is basically the technology, the next big thing, poised also to change the world in some way in the future, and that post-quantum cryptography is exactly the right problem to be working on?
Yeah, I mean, I can start, give my perspective. I mean, it was really, I mean, Chris, you alluded to this earlier at the beginning of the podcast, but really with the breakthrough of Google's Willow chip, when it showed tangibly, really for the first time, as you scale qubits in a quantum system, for the longest time, the error rates would scale proportionally, and it was always sort of a theoretical break. It was a theoretical risk that we would never be able to solve that error correction, where basically you would never be able to achieve fault tolerant quantum computers, because as you add the number of qubits into a quantum system required to solve these interesting problems, these commercially interesting problems, you would have your error rates basically destroy any productive computation. And it was, really Google's Willow chip that demonstrated for the first time, by using, and funny enough, like AI assisted or AI powered error correction, as you scale the number of qubits in a quantum system, you can actually start to flatten out the error rates that you get, and it therefore provides a viable, and it demonstrated and proved a viable path towards building fault tolerant quantum systems. And we have our own quantum research team and algorithms team here at BTQ. Even prior to the acquisition of QPerfect, we have our chief quantum officer, Gavin Brennan, down in Sydney, Australia. And he's been, he was previously at NIST, and he's been a long-standing professor at Macquarie University. But, we've always known for a long time that, these sorts of problems would eventually be broken through. And so, we took on this problem of securing, digital infrastructure far beyond this demonstration. But I think that really proved to the world that, we and really 2025 has accentuated that with all of the, recent funding and progress across the board, from both hardware architectures to error correction schemes to decoders and all the different types of quantum algorithms, which we're also seeing improvements in, right? So when it comes to Shor's algorithm, which has always been, the sort of most popular algorithm to break encryption, there's been several improvements to actually implementing that algorithm on a quantum hardware on quantum hardware that basically decreases the quantum resources required. So Craig Gidney and his Google team showed a 20x improvement from their previous, I think it was 2019 result. And so, we've seen a ton of progress across the board throughout 2025, sort of, piggybacking off of Google's announcement, that has really made this a stark reality for many people around the world. And, funny enough, I mean, it was Google's Willow paper last December that kick-started this whole frenzy. And, even just at the beginning of the month, the same team dropped Google DeepMind and Google Quantum. They collaborated once again and showed that they can indeed improve the error correction schemes that are required in order to basically take a massive physical qubits and create a logical qubit from them. And so we're seeing more progress again, and it's just a really exciting time.
No, I agree. I think this breakthrough demonstrating below threshold error correction was indeed a very pivotal moment for the industry. But then also, obviously, the release of the paper that you referenced that showed 20 times improvement, that now it's around 1 million physical qubits that might be sufficient, right, to execute Shor's algorithm that can break the encryption.
Right.
So if we think actually before your time at BTQ, and if we think outside of just post-quantum cryptography and in general about security and trust, was there one experience in your career that fundamentally changed the way you think about these concepts?
With regards to how sort of like how important security is, or
Yeah. Because now, like, if we're thinking about digital infrastructure and securing it in the quantum era, obviously it's a very aspirational area to be involved in, I think, and to do exactly what you are doing. But maybe during your university times, there was like one thing that you realized indeed that this is like a very important area in terms of the impact also on people. And maybe that also made you to go into it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can share perspective for me. I mean, definitely. So in university, it was around the time when Ethereum had launched, and I was, programming smart contracts in the summers of between between my my semesters, and I just remember thinking that this whole blockchain infrastructure, this whole crypto space would I felt would inevitably become a huge part of the future. Where you can essentially bypass, and it's funny because I mean, especially as of late, we're seeing a lot of traditional institutions with this sort of proliferation of stablecoins move into the whole like crypto asset space. But it's like its original thesis was, you can bypass certain intermediaries, or at least create a more frictionless environment to do things like digital payments online, and digital finance. And so I remember in university thinking, okay, well, like I'm sort of bullish and placing my bets on this type of decentralized cryptographic infrastructure playing a really large role in the future. I didn't really have a strong idea of how existing banks work, and I think to this day it's still relatively opaque, which gives a lot of reason for why people are interested in these decentralized technologies facilitating digital finance. But with at least decentralized networks, they have this sort of that's transparency to them, but it also comes at the cost of being, it's basically all cryptography at the end of the day. Under the hood, it's all public key cryptography, and we're going to be seeing some privacy features, but all of this basically relies on the types of NIST standardized algorithms that the U.S. government is mandating. And the problem of using these NIST standardized algorithms, these post-quantum algorithms in blockchains, is that we're no longer in this centralized paradigm, and performance really matters. And so it's not as simple as taking like a bank's sort of like HSM infrastructure and imposing or updating it to post-quantum, which is of course a challenge in and of itself. But really, when we look towards blockchains and digital finance, updating the cryptographic inventory to become post-quantum secure creates a whole nother set of challenges. And just to give some anecdotes, for example, ECDSA, which is what pretty much every blockchain uses today, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, where you're seeing most of the financial activity circulate around, ECDSA signatures, which gets posted on chain with every transaction, is 66 bytes. And the first post quantum digital signature algorithm that the U.S. government standardized is MLDSA, which was derived from the crystals dilithium signature algorithm, and that is 4 kilobytes. So we're already seeing a 20x improvement, or sorry, not improvement, but like overhead when it comes to these signatures, and that's it's non-trivial. And so yeah, we sort of knew this would become a problem for a long time, and it's cool to see the rest of the world sort of sort of amass its center of gravity around the types of problems that we've been building solutions for.
Chris, you made me think of an exciting moment that Elvira and I share, just to paint the picture for the audience. Elvira and I are probably sending messages back and forth on Microsoft Teams 7 days a week. She's in London. I'm in North Carolina, so different time zones. But the messages are just going because stuff is happening in tech all the time. And one of the things that I think Elvira picked up on, related to Chris, exactly what you were just saying, is Vitalik Buterin, creator of the Ethereum network, comes out recently, and he says by 2028, we need to move from our current encryption to quantum safe encryption. And what I always find interesting when these sort of big names make these statements is, first of all, because I know Vitalik Buterin knows a lot more about cryptography than I'm ever going to know. And he may even know a lot more about the pace and potential of quantum computing and fault tolerance than I might ever know. So the first thing you always wonder, at least I always wonder, is, oh my gosh, did he see something? Did he speak to somebody? Because again, the people on this level, they have certain networks where maybe they become aware of a certain upcoming or impending advance. But I'm just wondering what thoughts you had when you saw such a prominent figure of, I guess, the world's second largest blockchain, and the fact that I picked up on you were coding smart contracts relatively early in the history of smart contracts, which is pretty cool to hear as well. Hopefully, you put a little ETH away at the time. Wink, wink, as we know what's happened since then. But just wondering, when you saw the founder of Ethereum effectively make that statement, did it get you guys excited?
I mean, it definitely got us excited. I mean, to be honest, I think we think the timelines that he's talking about are still a bit too late. When we're talking about really trillions of dollars at risk now, to have the Ethereum Foundation is known to move a little bit slow. I mean, they do incredible work, but with regards to a timeline in a technology like Ethereum, it takes a very long process in order to actually transition to PQC. And while Vitalik is saying, he's saying 2028 could be the day where quantum cryptographically relevant quantum computers arrive. I mean, that's nice and all, but really what we're looking for is meaningful plans and a process to actually migrate over. As far as Ethereum goes, they have what's called a lean roadmap right now, which involves baking in PQC, post-quantum cryptography, into the L1. Their roadmap right now runs at about 4 to 5 years from 2025 in order to fully migrate over to PQC. So they're looking at a 2030 date roughly in order to become quantum safe. And we feel that's still too late. I mean, again, we're talking about trillions of dollars today at risk that over the course of the next 5 years will enlarge meaningfully. And to have basically a post-quantum roadmap that doesn't secure assets for another 5-6 years is reason for concern. And so really what we're looking at is ways to shorten that timeline and to provide, again, meaningful solutions that people and companies and institutions can deploy today in order to still interface with this wonderful infrastructure that has already been set up in Ethereum and Solana and Bitcoin, but also interface with it and interact with it in a way that is quantum secure. And that's really what our as far as BTQ's software division goes, as and we obviously interact with our hardware team a ton to actually deploy these solutions. But we're able to approach this from this full stack of providing both hardware and software to interact with blockchain infrastructure, digital finance in a quantum secure way.
Now, we had the privilege a couple weeks ago of speaking to a wider sort of cross section of the BTQ team, and the statement that was made Sean, it might have been you that made the statement. I'm not 100% sure, but effectively, I remember my eyebrows going up. I was sitting in a hotel room in London, and as I sat there, we were talking about as you mentioned, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and one of their roles, amongst other things, is to put out the different encryption standards. And of course, encryption standards are not like set in stone, in that we developed the internet in the 1990s. We developed more and more features of the internet. The hackers are changing what they do. The defense mechanisms are changing what they do. The way in which we define, I mean, the computers are becoming more and more capable, so they can do more and more brute force type calculations faster, if that's indeed the way that they're going. And so we can't necessarily think of encryption as like this static thing, but somebody on the BTQ side of the call basically alluded to the fact that the National Institute of Standards and Technology published a certain standard. It might have been in like 2004. Let's just say effectively 20 years ago, and certain entities on the internet today, and I'm sure this is always the case, so it's both surprising and not surprising if you think of human nature. Certain entities on the internet today have still not even adopted what was put in place 20 years ago. And we were just talking about like the blockchain world, certain blockchains, and what they have to do to adopt a certain standard. But then you could think of the internet at large, or regular people or companies that are making these devices, and you could think, what hope do we have as a society that everybody adopts what they should adopt, and is forward looking? I mean, getting people to be forward looking on any topic is hard, but something like encryption, that could be even harder. So Sean, what hope do you think we have to be ready if by 2028 or onwards?
Yeah, I think I might have been the one to bring that up. The term used in our industry is called cryptographic migration. I kind of like that word because it makes me think of about a flock of birds, where you got the front of the pack is already heading their way north, and then you got a bunch of laggards that sit behind, and the group is totally spread out. You got the early adopters, the middle adopters, the laggards. I think what we've seen in previous cryptographic migrations, as they say, the best predictor for future success is past success. I think we have seen like varied levels of success on crypto migrations in the past. I think the very first cryptographic algorithm ever released as a standard was an algorithm called DES in 1977. It's been deprecated for several decades now, but still you're going to see chip designers and systems engineers continuing to provide that algorithm in their system today, almost 50 years later. And you kind of have to wonder why people would continue to go through the effort of adding these algorithms still. And the answer is because there are so many obsolete, very old systems that exist on the internet today that have to be compatible with those things, despite the fact that the standard says stop using this algorithm. Then you have the other problem, which is algorithms being introduced that don't fully make it out to the systems. So I think the algorithm we talked about on that call was the ECC algorithm suite, which was standardized a few decades ago. Still, sometimes you don't see that algorithm where you would really like to see it. So when it comes to something like post-quantum cryptography, I'd like to put that in context a little bit, because now things are much, much harder to secure than they were 20 years ago. Back when we had personal computers and data centers and server rooms connected over the internet, things were maybe not so difficult. Now that we have devices practically everywhere in places that are hard to reach, IoT devices that you sort of set and forget for 10 or 20 years and you never look at again, or very, very large, cumbersome technology stacks sitting in server rooms, most of which we don't even really know what the status of the firmware on those things are. Other harrowing facts in the cybersecurity world would include the number of systems that still run Windows 95 or earlier versions of Windows. So it's difficult to migrate computer systems to new security standards. So we knew, making a product in this space, that the post-quantum algorithms, which are notoriously very bulky, have very large key sizes, are also going to be hard to integrate. Not to mention the fact that other standardizing processes around the world are happening in parallel to NIST. So NIST has already selected 3 algorithms in their standard about a year ago, but Europe is considering other algorithms like classic Macaleese and Frodo-KEM. South Korea is picking 4 completely different algorithms from either continent. China has its own standardization schemes going on. And so actually migrating the systems to the right post-quantum standard is actually going to be quite difficult. I think where we have a pretty unique advantage here is in the fact that we have developed a technology that we consider to be crypto agile. So once we have deployed our hardware product inside of your system, basically what this means is you are now agile to new algorithms as they pop up. In the past, when you've designed secure hardware, oftentimes you sort of hard code the algorithms in. You make the choice up front which algorithms you want to use, and then those are sort of locked in over the duration of that product lifecycle. But with the product that we're making, we can give you the same high security guarantees. We can give you very, very high performance guarantees on that cryptography. But we also allow you to update the cryptography on the fly with secure update mechanisms as well. We don't need to hard code the algorithms in. We have a special architecture that actually lets you run today's algorithms, the last era's algorithms, and most of the algorithms that are likely to be coming out in the future as well. So when it comes to crypto migrations, this is something that I care a lot about as the head of product for Silicon here at BTQ. I'm the one that goes out and interfaces with a lot of people who sort of show me their huge technology stack and they say, Sean, how do you migrate this? And I used to not really have a great answer for that, but thanks to the engineers on my team, I think we're coming out with a series of very great solutions that allow people to do that pretty easily.
Sean, you actually preempted in some way the question that I had for you, that obviously the urgency that is driving right now the global community in terms of transitioning to quantum safe algorithm is exactly the point that migration takes like really long time to happen. So from BTQ's perspective, what does it mean exactly to be ready for Q-Day, to be quantum ready in practical terms? So how companies can adopt PQC, and you exactly refer to the stack, right? Like, can they do it without entirely rewriting the stack when adopting?
In some cases, you can. So in certain very reprogrammable type of computer environments, like in a server room, I think what we find is the performance of post-quantum cryptography doesn't take too huge of a dent out of migrating something as large and as reprogrammable as that. So if we have Cloudflare to thank and a lot of other sort of internet service providers to thank for already having some pretty agile hardware set up that could allow you to do this in a rudimentary way. But when it comes to the rest of our world systems, like the chips that you would find in the braking system of your car, or in the navigation system of your car, or in a defense system that would be highly dangerous and needs to be highly secured, or in a security camera that's very, very low power budget. These are the things that are extremely hard to migrate. And so to prepare the companies that work on these types of sort of low power systems or long lifetime systems, you have to make smart choices up front about the hardware platform you pick. And so the most important thing for these companies to get a jump on is making smart choices about the platform, the new platforms that are going out into the world today. So our sort of goal as a team is to strive to have as wide a variety of hardware and software solutions for those companies to migrate their systems. And then the rest is sort of up to the customer. Not everybody is going to be on board with post-quantum cryptography or make those smart choices today. That's the whole reason why we have a really long migration time. Our goal is to try to make sure that that is as painless and as future-proofed as possible. What a tragedy it would be if someone put our platform in a product and then they couldn't update it later, or they realized that the algorithm that they picked turned out to be insecure. These are all problems that the cryptography world faces today, and we want to make sure that those companies are flexible and ready for what comes next.
I mean, something that Sean mentioned that I think deserves a bit more attention is the fact that we talk about Cloudflare and internet service providers who very very thankfully provide a lot of services to secure web traffic, but really when you think about the internet and the value facilitated by the internet, I would say the vast majority of it actually operates outside of web traffic and more in things like sensors, things like payment cards, things like routers. This is like very critical infrastructure that, again, as Sean mentioned, lives outside of a laptop, lives out in the field somewhere, and requires this type of this type of set it and forget it. Could be out there for 20 years, and the need for this to be reprogrammable and upgradable in the future. If you think about things like satellites and things being shipped out to space, you don't want to have to haul those things back down in the event that some secure element on them wasn't able to support some future cryptographic standard. And so this is it feels like a really important piece of the story where we've heard some people online, some critics say, okay, well, Cloudflare is already securing X percent, it's something like 43% of web traffic with post-quantum cryptography. I mean, that's great, but there's in terms of value and securing value across the internet, the vast majority happens outside of just website traffic.
It's very interesting. Thank you for this comment. And one of your solutions that you released actually from a site is quantum secure stablecoin network. So if we think about stablecoins and in general how companies are transitioning the systems to quantum secure, there is a certain layer in terms of saying what are the most critical systems, right? What should go first in terms of that prioritization. So if we are thinking about stablecoins, why do you think they are the most critical systems that have to be protected against quantum threats already today?
Yeah, I mean, so stablecoins are a sort of subset of this thematic transition towards digitizing or tokenizing real world assets. And so you've had the DTCC, who is like the de facto clearinghouse of pretty much the international trading system, come out and say that they're starting to offer tokenized products, or they will soon offer tokenized products on chain. And so stablecoins and really sort of tokenized asset, they operate in a very similar way. There's some financial, let's call it institution, let's call it a bank, that in the case of stablecoins, they receive a US dollar and they mint, which means to just basically circulate a digital equivalent, a digital twin of that US dollar sitting in their bank account. And of course, this digital version can exists on top of blockchain infrastructure and can move across the world at the speed of light, and has 24/7 markets, and drastically reduces costs. Same thing for tokenized assets. So you take something like a Tesla stock, and someone some bank holds custody of that, and then you mint a sort of digital twin of that Tesla stock online for people to trade again in this very frictionless and an easy way. And so we're seeing the proliferation of these tokenized assets happen across US markets, and really that serves as a sort of global indicator for where you can presumably see a lot of other markets in the world moving towards. And that's fantastic, but it does come with inherent risks, and especially as you talk about blockchains and the quantum risk to blockchains. When we think about the quantum risk to tokenized assets, it's relatively simple. You can think about every time let's say Circle or Tether, every time they mint, let's call it 100,000 USDC or USDT into circulation, they're essentially calling a contract on the blockchain, and signing it using, typically it's called a multi-sig, but think about it as they're basically authorizing the transaction from like inside Tether or Circle's key management solution. And all these interactions are using classical cryptography, which means that they're quantum insecure. Which means that a quantum adversary could be basically looking at all of the transactions that they've been posting to the blockchain, harvesting those public keys, and could be in the process of decrypting them using a quantum computer. And in the event that a quantum adversary is eventually able to derive the private key from the exposed public keys of these asset issuers, they will then be able to call that mint contract on chain and, let's say, mint $1 trillion into circulation without having any of those, a single dollar backed in their reserves. And that would cause an obvious systemic risk to whatever financial infrastructure that is consuming and utilizing those dollars. And it would not be easy to track whatsoever, because at the speed of a snap, there's probably thousands of trades that have taken those tokens and distribute them into different liquidity pools across different chains. And so you can't you can't just like rewind the state back. It gets very complicated very, very quickly. And so that's sort of the primary and sort of most obvious risk that quantum computers pose to these tokenization platforms for both stable coins and any real world asset, in terms of like treasuries, debt, equities, etc. And then there's also the by the same sort of reasoning, you can imagine the threats to anyone's wallets and therefore the assets that they hold. And so you could also plausibly have again, I sort of touched on this at the beginning. It's sort of funny to see the sort of like the more traditional financial world move into the crypto space, where it was previously predicated upon decentralization, and now you have basically banks holding custody of trillions of dollars eventually of assets on behalf of customers. And so there creates a sort of like a honeypot effect again, which is also a massive security risk. It just makes sort of attacks easier to carry out because where all the value is stored. And you have this like build up of and this single target, this bullseye target on certain financial institutions and intermediaries, and therefore it seems very, very plausible, and in fact in line with how the U.S. government is mandating post-quantum cryptography for U.S. governments and institutions. A bank can't have one half of its operations be post-quantum secure, and that half being plausibly the sort of off-chain operations, and then have the other half being the on-chain operations be not post-quantum. It needs to be in lockstep with each other. And so that seems like a glaring problem and an opportunity for us to solve.
Something I admit I'm curious about, because you hear of it periodically from the Visas of the world, the MasterCards, the Discover cards. I know JP Morgan has mentioned it. My assumption is, in the world of financial services, where the brand name of the institution, what it's really built on is trust. The fact that you can trust that when you sign in, you're not going to see transactions that you didn't make, or if you do see any that you didn't make, you can trust that you can call them, you can get the problem rectified. And a lot of these institutions mention here and there, if you look for it, something about quantum, them sort of preparing, doing something. Now, what's unclear, and my curiosity to ask you as people who are actually in the space, is when you would hear a major financial institution, a major bank talking about doing their research to become quantum safe or quantum secure, is that a case where, in theory, they might aspire to work with a company like BTQ? Or do you think for firms that are just so large, 100 billion plus market cap and all of that, would it be more common in how the industry works to see them try to hire a team, or to use their current team of cybersecurity professionals and information security professionals to sort of come up with their own internal solution? I'm just trying to get a sense of, when you think of the total market for sort of quantum safe encryption, and you sort of think, maybe the blockchains and the decentralized world goes one way, but we're still going to have an awful lot of money sitting in the centralized world. And then you have all shapes and sizes of organizations. I'm just curious how easy or difficult it is for these firms to basically say, "Yep, we agree with you. It's important, and we're going to build." Because you see that a bit with AI these days. Like some firms out there, they don't want to work with OpenAI. They don't want to work with Anthropic and the big players. They want to quote unquote build their own model. And I'm wondering if companies out there are going to try to implement their own security solutions around quantum, or if that just doesn't make any sense at all.
I guess it's a question for me. Um, I think it's tough because if you go to a bank and you see their IT team and you talk with them and they huddle up as a team and they go, we need to replace like 1,000 boxes on my server rack and make them be post quantum secure or do a massive firmware update. Some of those boxes will be amenable to the change and some won't. And so at some point along the line, the IT team there is going to be faced with a problem where updating the firmware, doing the administration of that hardware is going to reach a dead end. And then you'll have to start looking for other options to do the rest of your network. At that point, the IT team would be faced with building their own boxes or building their own chips. And that's just not even in the realm of possibility for some of these folks. I would think that any IT team that wants to build their own hardware is pretty crazy. So the goal there is working with different hardware manufacturers. We can sort of inoculate those devices with post-quantum security inside. And as soon as you can make that possible, then migrations become easier. But that's sort of where you're left with. Chris, I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, from the conversations that we've been having, with Sean and banks and large institutions, their cryptographic inventory is large, and it's. I mean, they recognize the need to move it over eventually, and for them, they're sort of in this position where they are still taking what's called basically accounting for all of the forms of cryptography that they're using. And then deciding then at that point how they want to migrate over. But our position is, as soon as they decide and they have an understanding of which pieces they want to migrate over to PQC, we have the best in class available solution that will operate within their data centers and outside of their data centers. So it's a one-stop shop. Similarly for the decentralized space, when you look at, again, the DTCC, issuing and tokenizing assets on chain. When you look at payment cards like Visa offering on-chain products, we're seeing all of this happen in conjunction with blockchain focused or Web3 native teams who have their own in-house expertise in how to build, deploy, and maintain those products. And so we're seeing, a similar pattern emerge where, they're essentially willing to outsource and lean on an experienced team to deliver that solution. And as far as, post-quantum digital assets go, really there's no team outside of BTQ who has been working on this for as long as we have and have as many products available.
And I know we've dominated the discussion today with the idea of sort of transmitting value, transmitting payments, securing assets, digital assets or assets. Traditional banks are holding assets. This idea of the financial infrastructure of the world, which makes complete sense. Like if you're going to worry about something, you might worry first about financial infrastructure. But you would imagine that any industry, and really all industries, take in data and have valuable data of different shapes and forms and kinds. Do you see interactions as BTQ sort of goes through its day to day with other industries or sectors outside of the financial sector? And if so, like which sectors seem to be the most forward thinking on this security and encryption idea beyond the banks and the financials?
Well, strangely enough, the automotive sector has been a really early mover on this. I think it seems surprising at the surface why that would be the sector that cares the most. But if you think about some of the most exciting applications of AI, you think about self-driving cars, and then you start thinking about networking inside those cars, the rapid adoption of 5G, and the necessity to run all these things at low power. And then all of a sudden, you have a situation where you have a high reliability product like a car that is totally connected inside with thousands of chips. They were the first movers, as far as I could see. But I'd say that a lot of other safety critical industries are not too far behind that. So even when I started Radical Semiconductor and now at BTQ, it's been continuing. Some of the people that keep popping up are customers in the defense world, customers in the IoT world, who especially ones who make high security devices there, and then companies that work on critical infrastructure like power grids. These are the people who are looking the furthest into the future to adopt better platforms right now. But you know what? Banking and payments are also really are really not that far behind that either. Even the fact that people within blockchain are thinking about post-quantum cryptography is a pretty good sign that the bulk of industries are starting to catch on that this is very important. And so I believe we're kind of really at the starting line here of rapid adoption. I don't think I could have said that 5 years ago. Even after the NIST round 3 algorithms had been created, I was very sure that we had taken the right bet and that success for us was right around the corner. But no, I think it's taken us an additional 4 or 5 years to actually see people open their eyes and really try to ask for these things now. I've never seen the kind of demand for post-quantum migration that I've seen today. And I would only expect that to accelerate.
Yeah, there's a few industries as well that are sort of more greenfield and in that, they're newer industries that maybe don't have, predefined supply chains or relationships. Things like drones, which are emerging, and robotics, but really similar to the sort of automotive industry that Sean was talking about, where you're seeing the sort of the convergence of AI and machinery come together in the forms of these new products. But we any robot or any drone that gets deployed for military or otherwise purposes will need to be this type of profile, which is low power and reprogrammable that our IP offers. Same things for robotics. If you're going to be having robots in someone's homes or even in a warehouse, you'll want those to be quantum secure. And so we're seeing a lot of opportunities in those industries as well.
Chris, I love that you mentioned robots. I mean, talk about a hot space these days. And in recent weeks, the idea of throwing or launching data centers into space has been a big one. And the idea of, more and more of these autonomously driven vehicles that people in some, they call it physical AI now. Robotics is, I guess, the name of yesterday. Physical AI is the name of the future. And you can rest assured, any listener out there, these are going to be topics that we will certainly hit upon in future episodes. But I want to thank BTQ for joining us. I want to thank Elvira for contributing to the discussion. I do have to state the following to clarify: the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of Wisdom Tree and BTQ and are subject to change. Anything we present in this podcast is not intended to be relied upon as a forecast, research, nor as investment or tax advice. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are not a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities, and reliance upon them is at the sole discretion of the listener. Please remember, past performance is no indication of future results. So thank you everyone again for joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you again in 2026. Take care and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.